The kingdom of Moonvale was a realm carved between mountain peaks and moonlit rivers, a land where night and day seemed to dance in eternal balance. Silver mist rolled across the valleys each dawn, veiling the castles in a soft haze of mystery, while at night, the stars shone brighter than anywhere else in the world, for it was said that the moon itself watched over this kingdom. But the moon's blessings had dimmed long ago. Years had passed since the tragedy that struck the royal family, a night of fire, betrayal, and blood. The people remembered it only in whispers now, the night the Alpha King's firstborn vanished, stolen from her cradle beneath a blood-red moon. The child of prophecy, the girl with eyes like starlight, was gone, and with her disappearance came a curse. The forests grew colder. The wolves grew restless. The moon stopped blessing the waters of the kingdom, and the bond between man and beast began to break. The king's grief hardened into silence, the queen's heart faded into illness, and the kingdom slowly forgot the child's laughter that once filled its halls. But the moon never forgot. Far beyond the castle walls, deep within the northern wilds where no crown dared tread, a small cottage stood hidden between ancient trees. Its roof was thatched with moss, its windows flickering with golden light, and within it, a young woman lived, unaware of her bloodline, unaware of the destiny that slept within her veins. Her name was Lyra. She had been raised by an old herbalist who found her as an infant in the ashes of a burned-out carriage. To the villagers, she was a quiet girl with a gentle soul, the one who spoke to the forest as if it were alive, who healed wounded birds, who smiled even when the world gave her little reason to. But there was something strange about her. The wolves never harmed her. When she walked through the woods at night, they followed her like shadows, their eyes glowing faintly silver, not as predators, but as guardians. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, the moonlight itself seemed to bend toward her, brushing against her skin like a lover's hand. It was as if the moon remembered who she was, even when the world did not. One winter evening, as snow began to fall softly upon the roofs of the village, Lyra stood by the frozen river. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the surface, pale skin, hair like spun gold, and eyes that gleamed not brown or blue, but a muted silver, like the edge of a blade beneath moonlight. She often wondered why she felt different. Why the howls that echoed from the mountains never frightened her, why the stars whispered to her in her dreams, and why her heart ached every time she saw the castle's distant silhouette from the hills. Somewhere deep within her, something called to her, something ancient, something waiting. That night, she dreamt of the Moonvale Palace. She saw herself standing before a grand hall of glass and stone, the floor glimmering with silver veins that pulsed like living light. Wolves carved in marble lined the walls, their eyes glowing faintly, and at the end of the hall stood a throne draped in silk and shadow. Upon it sat a man, tall, dark-haired, his eyes burning like molten steel. He wore no crown, yet the air bowed around him. She couldn't see his face clearly, but when his gaze met hers, a rush of warmth filled her chest, a feeling both terrifying and familiar. Then she heard it, a voice not her own, echoing through her mind. "The Alpha will find you when the moon turns red again." When she awoke, dawn had broken, painting the world in frost and gold. But the echo of that voice lingered, humming beneath her skin like a heartbeat. That same morning, miles away in the high mountains of Moonvale, the Alpha King stood upon the ramparts of his citadel. His name was Kale of the Silver Fang, the youngest Alpha ever crowned, the wolf whose roar could silence an army. But behind the armor, behind the stoic face and the reputation of a legend, was a man haunted by the same dream. For nights, he had seen her, a girl bathed in moonlight, standing beside a frozen river. Her eyes, her presence, her soul, everything about her called to him in ways he could not explain. And when the seers gathered that morning, they whispered the same words the moon had spoken to Lyra. When the moon bleeds again, the lost heir shall return, and the Alpha shall guard her with his life. The prophecy had begun to stir. That night, the moon turned red once more, crimson bleeding into silver, and somewhere in the northern forest, wolves howled louder than they had in years. Lyra woke to the sound of claws scraping her door, and when she looked outside, she saw a single wolf waiting at her threshold, its fur gleaming with moonfire, its eyes the same molten gold as the Alpha King's. The creature didn't snarl. It only bowed its head, as if inviting her to follow. And though she didn't understand why, Lyra felt no fear. Because deep inside, something had awakened. Something old. Something royal. Something that had been waiting for this moment since the night she was taken from her cradle. The moon had remembered its daughter. And the Alpha had begun his journey to find her. The kingdom of Moonvale was a realm carved between mountain peaks and moonlit rivers, a land where night and day seemed to dance in eternal balance. Silver mist rolled across the valleys each dawn, veiling the castles in a soft haze of mystery, while at night, the stars shone brighter than anywhere else in the world, for it was said that the moon itself watched over this kingdom. But the moon's blessings had dimmed long ago. Years had passed since the tragedy that struck the royal family, a night of fire, betrayal, and blood. The people remembered it only in whispers now, the night the Alpha King's firstborn vanished, stolen from her cradle beneath a blood-red moon. The child of prophecy, the girl with eyes like starlight, was gone, and with her disappearance came a curse. The forests grew colder. The wolves grew restless. The moon stopped blessing the waters of the kingdom, and the bond between man and beast began to break. The king's grief hardened into silence, the queen's heart faded into illness, and the kingdom slowly forgot the child's laughter that once filled its halls. But the moon never forgot. Far beyond the castle walls, deep within the northern wilds where no crown dared tread, a small cottage stood hidden between ancient trees. Its roof was thatched with moss, its windows flickering with golden light, and within it, a young woman lived, unaware of her bloodline, unaware of the destiny that slept within her veins. Her name was Lyra. She had been raised by an old herbalist who found her as an infant in the ashes of a burned-out carriage. To the villagers, she was a quiet girl with a gentle soul, the one who spoke to the forest as if it were alive, who healed wounded birds, who smiled even when the world gave her little reason to. But there was something strange about her. The wolves never harmed her. When she walked through the woods at night, they followed her like shadows, their eyes glowing faintly silver, not as predators, but as guardians. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, the moonlight itself seemed to bend toward her, brushing against her skin like a lover's hand. It was as if the moon remembered who she was, even when the world did not. One winter evening, as snow began to fall softly upon the roofs of the village, Lyra stood by the frozen river. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the surface, pale skin, hair like spun gold, and eyes that gleamed not brown or blue, but a muted silver, like the edge of a blade beneath moonlight. She often wondered why she felt different. Why the howls that echoed from the mountains never frightened her, why the stars whispered to her in her dreams, and why her heart ached every time she saw the castle's distant silhouette from the hills. Somewhere deep within her, something called to her, something ancient, something waiting. That night, she dreamt of the Moonvale Palace. She saw herself standing before a grand hall of glass and stone, the floor glimmering with silver veins that pulsed like living light. Wolves carved in marble lined the walls, their eyes glowing faintly, and at the end of the hall stood a throne draped in silk and shadow. Upon it sat a man, tall, dark-haired, his eyes burning like molten steel. He wore no crown, yet the air bowed around him. She couldn't see his face clearly, but when his gaze met hers, a rush of warmth filled her chest, a feeling both terrifying and familiar. Then she heard it, a voice not her own, echoing through her mind. "The Alpha will find you when the moon turns red again." When she awoke, dawn had broken, painting the world in frost and gold. But the echo of that voice lingered, humming beneath her skin like a heartbeat. That same morning, miles away in the high mountains of Moonvale, the Alpha King stood upon the ramparts of his citadel. His name was Kale of the Silver Fang, the youngest Alpha ever crowned, the wolf whose roar could silence an army. But behind the armor, behind the stoic face and the reputation of a legend, was a man haunted by the same dream. For nights, he had seen her, a girl bathed in moonlight, standing beside a frozen river. Her eyes, her presence, her soul, everything about her called to him in ways he could not explain. And when the seers gathered that morning, they whispered the same words the moon had spoken to Lyra. When the moon bleeds again, the lost heir shall return, and the Alpha shall guard her with his life. The prophecy had begun to stir. That night, the moon turned red once more, crimson bleeding into silver, and somewhere in the northern forest, wolves howled louder than they had in years. Lyra woke to the sound of claws scraping her door, and when she looked outside, she saw a single wolf waiting at her threshold, its fur gleaming with moonfire, its eyes the same molten gold as the Alpha King's. The creature didn't snarl. It only bowed its head, as if inviting her to follow. And though she didn't understand why, Lyra felt no fear. Because deep inside, something had awakened. Something old. Something royal. Something that had been waiting for this moment since the night she was taken from her cradle. The moon had remembered its daughter. And the Alpha had begun his journey to find her. Dawn came slowly to the frozen valley, the first light of the sun spilling across the treetops like melted gold. Snowflakes shimmered as they fell, melting upon the warm breath of the wolves that guarded the clearing. The air was still, yet alive, as though the entire forest held its breath in reverence for something sacred that had awakened. Inside the small cottage, Lyra stirred from uneasy dreams. Her sleep had been filled with images she could not understand, flashes of silver banners, a crown made of moonlight, and a great wolf standing before a burning castle. Each time she reached for the vision, it slipped away like smoke between her fingers, leaving her heart pounding and her throat dry. She rose quietly, wrapping her wool cloak around her shoulders. The cottage smelled faintly of herbs and ash, a scent she had known since childhood. It was her home, yet something in her soul whispered that she belonged elsewhere, somewhere vast, ancient, and waiting. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the frost-coated window. Her eyes, pale silver, brighter than any mortal's, caught the light like mirrors of the moon. They were the one thing that had always set her apart. The villagers said she had been born beneath a red moon, abandoned at the river's edge, and that the gods had marked her as their own. They called her Moon's Orphan, a name she bore with quiet pain. Outside, the forest stirred. A distant howl echoed, long, low, haunting. Not the cry of any ordinary wolf. It was deeper, ancient, commanding. Her heart froze mid-beat. She had heard that call before, once, long ago, when she was a child wandering the riverbanks at dusk. That sound had made her look up to see a shadow moving among the trees, its eyes glowing gold. A creature that had stared at her for what felt like eternity before fading back into darkness. Since then, she had always felt watched, not with malice, but with an inexplicable sense of protection. This morning, that feeling returned stronger than ever. She stepped outside into the cold. The wolves that always lingered near her home lifted their heads. One, an older she-wolf with silver fur, pressed its muzzle to Lyra's hand in silent greeting. Lyra smiled faintly, stroking the creature's head. "Did you hear it too?" she whispered. The wolf's eyes glimmered with strange understanding. Beyond the trees, hidden beneath shadow and silence, Kale stood watching. He had been there since nightfall, unseen, his presence blending into the mist and pine. He had watched her light the fire, feed the wolves, tend to the herbs hung from the rafters, every movement graceful, natural, untouched by the vanity of nobility. Yet beneath that simplicity, he could feel the sleeping power within her soul. The mark of the moon's bloodline. She was the heir, though she did not yet know it. He had expected to find a fragile girl lost in obscurity. Instead, he found a spirit unbroken. A woman who had survived exile, loneliness, and the cold indifference of a world that had forgotten her. Her strength called to him more fiercely than any battle ever had. When she stepped into the light, the bond between them stirred again, invisible threads tightening, weaving through the air. He felt it like a tremor beneath his skin, a pulse echoing his own heartbeat. Every instinct in him urged him to reveal himself. Yet he held back. The time was not right. He had sworn to protect her, no. Tea frightened her. But the longer he watched, the harder it became to remain silent. Lyra wandered deeper into the forest that morning, basket in hand, gathering frostberries and moon petals, flowers that bloomed only under the touch of lunar light. As she bent to pick one, the wind shifted. The scent of pine and smoke reached her, unfamiliar, masculine, sharp. Her breath hitched. She turned suddenly, scanning the trees. Nothing, only silence. Yet she knew someone was there. "Who's there?" she called softly, her voice steady but wary. "I know these woods better than anyone. You can't hide." Kale's pulse quickened. Her courage reminded him of the queens who had ruled before her, fierce, regal, even without a crown. For a moment, he considered stepping forward. But then, a faint growl rippled through the forest, not from him, but from beyond. Lyra froze. From the east, the wind carried the scent of ash. Smoke curled between the branches. The wolves around her stiffened, their ears twitching in alarm. Cale felt it too, the taint of danger, foul and metallic. Rogues. Wolves of no pack. Killers who hunted for blood and gold. They emerged from the fog like shadows given flesh, 3 of them, eyes burning yellow, bodies scarred and feral. Their laughter was harsh and low. "Well, look what we found," one sneered. "A pretty little rabbit gathering flowers." Lyra took a slow step back, clutching her basket. The wolves at her side bristled, baring their teeth, but the rogues were stronger, larger. She could smell the madness in them, the mark of corruption. Cale moved before he even thought. By the time the rogues lunged, he was already there, a blur of black cloak and silver steel. His blade flashed once in the pale light, a whisper through air, and the first rogue fell before it even realized what had struck him. The second growled, circling. "An alpha," he hissed. "From the highlands?" Cale's golden eyes met his. "Run," he said, voice low, dangerous. The rogue didn't. The fight was over in moments, swift, brutal, precise. When silence fell, only Cale stood among the snow, his breath steady, his eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight. The wolves around Lyra lowered their heads in recognition, sensing his dominance. Their allegiance shifted instinctively to him. Lyra stood frozen, her lips parted, her heart hammering. The man before her looked carved from shadow and storm, tall, broad-shouldered, his black cloak stained with snow. His gaze, though fierce, held no cruelty. Only something she could not name, something ancient and boundless. "Who are you?" she breathed. Cale turned slowly, his gaze meeting hers. The moment their eyes locked, the air seemed to still. 1,000 unspoken memories flashed between them, lives lived and lost, promises made. Before they were born, his voice came soft, steady as thunder before rain. "Someone who was sworn to find you." The words meant nothing to her, yet they sent a shiver down her spine, not from fear, but recognition. Deep within her soul, something awoke. The faint shimmer of light passed over her skin, so fast she almost thought she imagined it. The moon's mark, hidden for years, now stirring again. Cale saw it, the faint sigil glowing beneath her collarbone, and his breath caught. The air's seal, proof that destiny had finally taken shape. But Lyra, unaware of what it meant, stepped back, confusion clouding her eyes. "Find me? Why? What do you want?" Cale sheathed his blade. "To keep you alive." He did not say the rest, that she was the rightful ruler of a kingdom she'd never known, that she was the last bloodline capable of healing the curse spreading through the land. That her very heart was the moon's chosen vessel. That she was his fated mate. She didn't need to know. Not yet. For now, he would be her shadow, her shield. For now, she would see only the protector, not the king. But as he watched her, saw the silver in her eyes flicker like starlight, Cale knew one truth: he was already lost. The vow he made before the sacred flame was no longer bound by duty alone, it was bound by love. And love, when born between wolves, was the most dangerous magic of all. Night fell slowly over the forest, wrapping the trees in layers of mist and quiet silver light. The stars shimmered faintly above the snow-covered canopy, their glow mirrored in the river that cut through the heart of the valley like a ribbon of molten glass. The world seemed still, yet beneath the calm, something ancient stirred, a pulse of magic, quiet and waiting. In a small clearing, a fire burned low beside Lyra's cottage. Sparks drifted up into the darkness like fireflies, vanishing into the void between branches. Cale stood beside the flames, silent, his broad figure outlined in the orange glow. His cloak hung heavy with frost, his sword glinting faintly at his hip. Across from him, Lyra sat with her knees drawn close, a blanket draped around her shoulders. The wolves rested at her feet, their eyes half open, ever watchful. Neither had spoken for a long while. The fight with the rogues had left the air thick, with questions, with fear, and with something else neither dared to name. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. "You didn't have to save me." Cale's gaze did not waver. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." She studied him, her silver eyes catching the light of the fire. "You said you were sworn to find me." What does that mean? Who sent you? He hesitated. There were truths buried beneath centuries of silence, truths that could shatter her world if spoken too soon. But the weight of them pressed heavily on his tongue. There are things about your past, he said slowly, that you deserve to know. Things that were kept from you, for your protection. Lyra's breath caught. Her heart began to race. My past? He nodded. The night you were found by the river, that wasn't chance. You were not left there by misfortune, Lyra. You were hidden. The word hidden struck something deep inside her, like a door she didn't know existed suddenly creaking open. She shook her head slowly. That can't be true. I've lived here all my life. I'm no one. Just a healer, a girl from the woods. Kale's voice softened. You are not no one. He stepped closer to the fire, his shadow merging with its glow. There was a kingdom once, far beyond these forests, Moonvale, the realm of the Silver Crown. A land blessed by the moon herself. The royal line carried her gift, blood that could heal, command, and unite the packs. That kingdom fell 20 years ago. Its king was betrayed. Its castle burned. Lyra's eyes widened. She had heard the old stories, the fall of Moonvale, the war that followed, the cursed night when the moon turned red. But she had never imagined those tales had anything to do with her. Kale's voice dropped lower. The king's daughter vanished that night. The world believed she died with her people. But she was saved, carried away in secret by those loyal to the crown. Hidden among the common folk. Hidden, here. The fire crackled softly between them. Lyra could only stare. Her thoughts spun wildly, colliding with flashes of memory. A lullaby she didn't remember learning. The way the moon always seemed to call her by name, the silver mark on her shoulder that no one could explain. She whispered, You're saying? I'm her? Kale met her gaze. You are Lyra of the Silver Crown, heir to Moonvale. The last of your line. The world seemed to tilt. For a heartbeat, Lyra couldn't breathe. The words echoed in her mind like thunder, heir, crown, kingdom. She wanted to laugh, to deny it, to run. But deep down, she knew. Every dream, every strange stirring inside her heart, it had always been leading to this. I don't. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. If that's true, why didn't anyone tell me? Why let me live as? Kale looked away, his jaw tightening. Because the ones who destroyed your family still hunt your blood. They are the reason I was sent to find you. The reason I swore to protect you. He turned back toward her, his eyes glowing faintly with the golden light of his wolf form. You were hidden for your safety, Lyra. But your power cannot remain buried forever. The moon's blood is awakening inside you. The world will feel it. The rogues already have. Silence stretched again, broken NLY by the distant call of an owl. Lyra's mind spun. The thought of having a kingdom, of being more than she ever imagined, felt unreal, terrifying. She rose slowly, moving to the edge of the firelight, her gaze lifting to the sky where the moon hung pale and watchful. Its light touched her skin like a caress, and something inside her stirred, faint at first, then stronger. The air shimmered faintly around her. Her breath came fast. What's happening to me? She whispered. Kale took a step forward but didn't touch her. You're remembering what you are. The ground beneath her feet glowed faintly with light. The sigil on her shoulder, the mark of the moon's chosen, began to pulse through her cloak, casting soft silver ripples into the air. Her eyes widened in awe and fear. She saw flashes again, her father's voice calling her name, her mother's hands reaching out as flames consumed the palace, the cry of a great wolf howling beneath a blood-red sky. And through it all, the feeling of a promise, someone's vow that she would be safe, even if the whole world burned. When the vision faded, Lyra sank to her knees, shaking. I saw them, she whispered. My parents, the palace, the fire. I saw it all. Kale knelt beside her, his presence steady, unyielding. Then you know it's true. Tears glimmered in her eyes, though they didn't fall. If I'm who you say I am, what am I supposed to do now? He looked at her, this girl who had lived her whole life in exile, who carried a kingdom's hope in her fragile hands, who met destiny's cruelty with quiet strength. You do what your blood commands, Kale said softly. You rise. Lyra lifted her gaze to him. And you? I protect you, he said, the vow in his tone as heavy as iron. Until you no longer need me. Their eyes met again, silver against gold, and in that fragile silence, the bond between them deepened. Not just duty now, not prophecy, but something raw and real. A pull that neither could resist. The wolves around them shifted restlessly, sensing the change. The wind carried the scent of rain and distant thunder. The forest itself seemed to hum with anticipation. For the first time in centuries, the heir of Moonvale had been found. And the Alpha who had sworn to guard her felt his own fate entwine irrevocably with hers. As the moon climbed higher, casting its glow across their faces, Kale spoke one last truth, the one he had kept buried beneath all others. The blood of the moon is not only power, he said quietly. It is love, the kind that binds wolves for eternity. The kind that once united kings and queens. Lyra turned to him, the faintest tremor in her breath. Are you saying we're? He shook his head gently, cutting her off. Not yet. Some bonds take lifetimes to remember. The wind rose then, carrying their words into the trees. The fire dimmed to embers. Above them, the moonlight flared once more, and the forest bowed in silence. Somewhere, far beyond the mountains, the forces that had destroyed Moonvale felt the awakening of the air's power, and began to move again. But for that moment, within the quiet of the valley, Lyra and Kale stood side by side, two souls reborn beneath the same moon, bound by an ancient promise neither could yet fully understand. And in that silence, destiny began to breathe again. The days that followed were quiet, almost deceptively so. The forest around Lyra's home grew colder as winter deepened, yet beneath its frozen stillness, life stirred in secret. The winds carried the scent of coming change, and each dawn the snow gleamed a little redder under the morning sky, as though the heavens themselves were bleeding in warning. Kale felt it first, the shift, the pulse, the omen. It was faint at first, a flicker in the air, like a heartbeat out of rhythm with the world. But he knew what it meant. The red moon was returning. And with it, the forces that had once burned Moonvale to ash. From the cottage window, Lyra watched the same sky without knowing its meaning. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, uncertain, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. Each night since Kale's revelation, her dreams had grown stronger. Voices whispered her name. Shadows reached for her through walls of fire. Sometimes she woke to find her hands faintly glowing, her breath trembling with the echo of a power she couldn't yet control. She wanted to ask him more, about her parents, her kingdom, the curse that had destroyed it all, but Kale rarely spoke of the past. He taught through silence, through presence. When he wasn't standing guard at her door, he was training her in the woods, forcing her to feel the rhythm of her instincts. He called it, listening to the blood. Your power isn't something you summon, he said one cold morning, as they stood among frost-covered pines. It's something that answers. When you call upon it, you're not commanding the moon. You're remembering what you are. She frowned, rubbing her chilled hands together. And what am I, exactly? He looked at her, really looked, with that fierce, golden gaze that always seemed to strip away the walls she didn't know she'd built. You are the blood of gods and wolves, he said softly. The last bridge between man and magic. The world has forgotten what that means. You must remind it. The words made her throat tighten. I don't want to be a god. You don't have a choice, Kale said simply. But you can choose what kind you'll become. They trained until dusk, her learning to sense the heartbeat of the forest, the whisper of life in every stone and shadow. Kale moved like the predator he was, silent, precise, every gesture a lesson. He taught her to see without seeing, to listen without sound. And though she stumbled, though her power often sparked wild and uncontrolled, he never raised his voice. He only watched with that quiet patience that made her want to try again. Sometimes, when she grew frustrated, he'd smile, a faint, fleeting curve of his lips that made the air between them thicken. It was rare, that smile, but when it came, it felt like sunlight breaking through endless snow. And it scared her, because when she looked at him, she didn't just see a protector. She saw a shadow of something deeper, something written in the very rhythm of her heartbeat. That night, the wind shifted. The moon rose red. Kale stood on the ridge above the cottage, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The crimson light bathed the world in a surreal glow. The snow shimmered like liquid fire. Every wolf in the forest began to howl, long, mournful cries that echoed across the valley. It was a song of warning, of awakening. Lyra stepped out beside him, her cloak fluttering in the wind. Why is the moon red? He didn't look at her. Because the veil between worlds is thinning. Tonight, the past remembers. She frowned. Remembers what? War, he said quietly. Lightning flashed across the far hills, distant but bright. Kale's wolf, Fenris, raised his head and growled low. The air was thick with a strange energy, electric, humming, ancient. Lyra could feel it crawling beneath her skin. The mark on her shoulder pulsed once, twice, in time with the thunder. Then came the whisper, faint but unmistakable. A voice older than her own memories. Daughter of the silver moon. She gasped, clutching her chest. The world around her blurred. Suddenly she was standing somewhere else, a hall of mirrors and mist. The air smelled of roses and ash. Before her stood a woman dressed in silver armor, her face radiant and sad. Her hair shimmered white as snow. Lyra knew her instantly. Her mother, the Queen of Moonvale. The woman reached out a trembling hand. My light, my child, the darkness has awakened again. The blood moon rises, and with it, the one who destroyed us. Lyra's voice cracked. Mother, please, but the vision trembled, fading. The queen's words came like echoes through a storm. Find the crystal heart. Before he does, or the Pax will fall again. Then, silence. Lyra stumbled back into herself, collapsing into Kale's arms. He caught her easily, lowering her to the snow. Lyra, what did you see? She looked up at him, tears freezing on her lashes. The queen, my mother, she spoke to me. Kale's eyes darkened. What did she say? That he's coming. Her voice trembled. The one who destroyed Moonvale. Kale stiffened. He had known it was only a matter of time. The traitor, the Dark Alpha, the one who had betrayed the crown and cursed the bloodline, still lived. He rose slowly, scanning the forest. Then the red moon has truly returned. From somewhere deep in the woods, a distant roar shattered the silence, low, thunderous, primal. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The wolves around the cottage whined, ears pressed back. Lyra's hand gripped his arm. What is that? Kale's expression turned cold as steel. A hunter. He drew his sword, the blade catching the moonlight like liquid flame. Stay here. She shook her head fiercely. No, you can't face it alone. Lyra, Kale, please, she said, stepping closer. Her voice was small, trembling, but her eyes were steady. If I am who you say I am, then let me stand with you. For a moment, neither spoke. Snow fell between them, soft and silent. Then Kale nodded once. Stay behind me. They moved together into the trees, following the sound of breaking branches and snarling wind. The deeper they went, the darker it became, until the world around them was nothing but shifting shadows. And then they saw it. A creature, taller than a man, its form half wolf, half nightmare, tearing through the trees. Its eyes burned crimson, its claws gleaming black. It was not a natural wolf. It was twisted, corrupted, one of the Dark Alpha's creations. It roared when it saw them. Kale met its charge head-on, steel flashing. The clash was brutal, fang against blade, blood against snow. Lyra stood frozen at first, heart-pounding, every instinct screaming to run. But then she remembered her mother's words, find the crystal heart. Her power stirred. She raised her hands. Silver light erupted from her palms, bright as moonfire. It struck the creature mid-lunge, throwing it backward into a tree. The impact shook the ground. Kale turned, stunned, not by fear, but by awe. Lyra's mark burned like a star through her cloak. Her hair glowed pale white, her eyes lit with divine fury. The creature tried to rise again, but she raised her hand once more. This time, her voice carried through the trees like a whisper of wind. Sleep. The monster froze, and then, slowly, its body turned to ash. The snow swallowed it whole. When silence returned, Lyra fell to her knees, trembling, her strength fading. Kale was there in an instant, catching her before she fell. You shouldn't have used that power, he murmured, brushing frost from her cheek. I didn't mean to, she whispered. It just happened. He looked down at her, at the fragile girl who had just commanded the power of gods. His heart clenched. It's beginning, he said softly. The blood awakening. The world won't stay quiet after this. She leaned against him, exhausted. Her breath misting against his cloak. Then let it come, she murmured. I'm done running. Kale's jaw tightened, but a flicker of pride passed through his eyes. You sound like your mother. Above them, the red moon burned brighter, the first sign of the prophecy's second act. The forgotten daughter had awakened. The air had begun to rise. And somewhere, beyond the mountains, a pair of eyes just as ancient and cold opened for the first time in centuries. The war for Moonvale had begun again. But this time, the gods had chosen differently. This time, love itself stood ready to fight. The dawn after the red moon was not gentle. It came pale and wounded, with streaks of crimson lingering in the sky like fading scars. The forest lay silent, heavy with frost and memory. The snow still carried the scent of smoke and blood, remnants of the creature that had come in the night. Lyra awoke to the soft crackle of the fire. She lay wrapped in Kale's cloak, its warmth faintly carrying the scent of cedar and iron. For a moment, she didn't move. She only listened, to the whisper of wind against the walls, to the faint rhythm of his footsteps outside. He hadn't slept. She knew that much. When she finally rose, she found him standing beyond the cottage, his back turned to her, the morning light gilding his hair in gold and shadow. Fenris, his wolf, lay beside him, eyes sharp, ears twitching at sounds only they could hear. Kale's sword was drawn, its edge gleaming faintly blue in the dawn light, as if even steel recognized the danger that now watched them from afar. Lyra stood quietly, her breath visible in the cold. There was something different about him that morning, something heavy and unspoken, as though the weight of centuries had settled upon his shoulders again. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. The red moon has awakened every curse that once slept beneath this world. She stepped closer, her fingers tightening around her cloak. The creature last night, was that one of them? He nodded once. A shadow beast, born of corrupted magic. They were banished long ago, sealed beneath the ruins of Moonvale. But if one has broken free, his gaze hardened. It means the seal is failing. And my mother's warning? Lyra asked softly. The crystal heart? Kale turned to face her. The cold wind swept between them, carrying snowflakes like fragments of stars. The heart is not a gem, Lyra, he said. It's a relic, a source of power forged from the first moon's blood. It binds the world of wolves to the realm of the gods. When Moonvale fell, your mother hid it away. Lyra's breath caught. She said I had to find it before he does. The one who destroyed everything. The Dark Alpha, Kale murmured. His jaw tightened. He once ruled beside your mother's other, before betrayal blackened his soul. Now he seeks to claim what remains of her bloodline. And me, she whispered. Kale's silence was answer enough. The fire crackled in the distance, breaking the stillness. For a long moment, they stood together in the cold light, the forgotten heir and the last Alpha King, two broken halves of a dying prophecy. Finally, Kale spoke again. We leave at dusk. Lyra's eyes lifted. Leave? He met her gaze, steady, unyielding. We can't stay here. The northern mountains guard what remains of your mother's citadel, and the heart. If the Dark Alpha has already awakened, we're running out of time. Lyra looked toward the horizon. The mountains were distant, veiled in silver mist and storm. A shiver passed through her, not from the cold, but from something deeper, the sense that every step forward would carry her closer to a truth that would change everything. That evening, as the sun fell behind the peaks, they began their journey. The forest gave way to frozen plains, where the air burned in the lungs and the ground glittered like shattered glass. The wind howled through the trees, and wolves followed their scent from afar, silent guardians of a forgotten bloodline. Kale walked ahead, his movements sure despite the endless snow. Lyra followed close behind, her cloak fluttering, her heart restless with thoughts she couldn't name. Every time the wind shifted, she caught a glimpse of his profile, sharp, carved, steady as stone. Yet beneath that calm, she sensed the beast within him stir. They stopped only when the stars rose, a million cold fires blazing above them. Kale built a small fire beneath a cliffside, the glow painting gold over his scarred hands. Lyra sat opposite him, silent, her thoughts heavy. Finally, she spoke. Kale, if my mother hid the crystal heart, why didn't she destroy it? Why keep something that could cause so much pain? Kale's gaze lifted to the flames. His voice, when it came, was quiet, almost distant. Because destruction was never her way. She believed light and shadow must coexist. The heart is not evil, Lyra. It only amplifies what already lives inside the one who wields it. So if someone pure used it, it could restore what was lost, he said softly. Revive the Pax. Heal the land. Lyra looked at him, the fire reflecting in her silver eyes. And if someone wicked claimed it? Kale's expression darkened. Then the world would burn again. A silence stretched between them, long, heavy, filled with unspoken fear. The fire crackled softly, throwing sparks into the cold night. At last, Lyra whispered, "You speak as though you've seen it happen before." He didn't answer at first. His gaze was far away, haunted. Then, after a long pause, he said quietly, "I was there when Moonvi." Ale fell. The words froze the air. Lyra stared at him. You fought in the war?" "I led it," he said, his voice a blade of memory. "Your mother trusted me with her armies. But when the Dark Alpha came, no army was enough. The sky itself turned against us. The moon bled. The gods fell silent. And when the castle burned, I swore an oath, to protect what remained of her line, even if it took me centuries." Lyra's heart trembled. Centuries? Kale's eyes met hers, ancient, endless, full of secrets that no mortal should hold. "The curse of the Alpha King," he said quietly. "Immortality bound by oath. Until the bloodline is restored, I cannot die." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind howled outside their cave, scattering snow into the firelight. Lyra's chest tightened. "You've been waiting, all this time. For me." He didn't answer, but the silence said everything. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She lay beside the fading fire, watching Kale's silhouette against the moonlight. He sat awake, always awake, his sword across his knees, his gaze fixed on the horizon. There was something about him, the way he carried solitude like armor, that made her heart ache. She wondered if he even remembered what warmth felt like. When she finally drifted into dreams, they were filled with fragments, flashes of the Queen, the sound of wolves howling, the pulse of a great crystal heart buried beneath ice. And through it all, a voice, low, rough, familiar, whispering her name like a promise. At dawn, they continued north. Days blurred into weeks. The journey grew harder, storms rising, paths vanishing beneath snowdrifts. Kale walked ahead always, cutting through wind and frost like a shadow forged of determination. He never complained, never rested. His presence was her compass, her safety, her strength. But something else stirred between them, something soft and dangerous. The way his hand lingered a little longer when he helped her across a river of ice. The way her eyes sought him when thunder rolled across the peaks. The way their silences began to mean more than words. It was not spoken. It didn't need to be. It lived in the air between heartbeats. One evening, as they neared the frozen lake that marked the edge of the Crystal Valley, the storm broke. Lightning split the sky and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Kale pushed her behind him, eyes blazing gold. "They've found us." Shapes moved through the snow, black wolves with red eyes, their growls like grinding stone. Lyra's pulse quickened. She reached for her magic, but Kale stepped forward, drawing his sword in one smooth motion. "Stay close," he said, his voice a command the storm itself obeyed. The first of the beasts lunged, and the world became chaos. Steel clashed against claw, snow too. Red crimson, thunder roared. Lyra felt her power rising again, wild and fierce. She reached out, and the ice beneath their feet exploded in a burst of silver light. When the storm cleared, the wolves were gone, their bodies dissolved into mist. Lyra stood trembling, her hands glowing faintly. Kale turned to her, breath visible in the cold. "You're growing stronger," he said quietly. Lyra met his gaze, chest heaving. "Or more dangerous." He sheathed his sword, stepping closer. Sometimes they're the same thing. Their eyes locked, gold and silver, fire and moonlight. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared. Only the two of them remained, ancient oaths and unspoken love, bound by fate and flame. Then Kale looked away. "We'll rest when we reach the valley," he said, voice rougher than before. Lyra turned too, though her heart was no longer steady. The wind carried the faintest whisper of the gods, and deep in the mountains ahead, a faint blue light began to glow beneath the ice. The crystal heart was waiting. And with it, the truth, about love, power, and the sacrifice destiny would soon demand. The mountains loomed like gods carved from ice. For 3 days, Lyra and Kale walked through the storm that refused to break, wind slicing through their cloaks, snow rising past their knees, and silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. It was as if the world itself wished to test them, to see whether flesh and will could endure the wrath of a cursed land. The nights were endless. The stars burned cold and distant, and the moon hid her face behind veils of cloud. Even the wolves that had once followed them disappeared into the blizzard. Only Kale's steady presence guided her now, his silhouette the single point of certainty in a world swallowed by white. And yet, despite the cruelty of the cold, something within Lyra began to change. Her steps grew surer, her pulse steadier. Each breath she took shimmered faintly with silver mist. Her dreams no longer frightened her, they called to her. Visions of her mother's laughter, her father's strong hands, the sound of a lullaby sung beneath a blood moon. They came to her like threads, weaving a memory of who she had been. The air of Moonvale was no longer lost. She was awakening. On the dawn of the 4th day, the storm broke. Lyra stood on the edge of a cliff, breathless as the wind cleared the veil of mist before her. What lay beyond stole her words, and her heart. The frozen citadel stretched across the valley below, its towers rising from glaciers like shards of crystal, its domes gleaming with frost and ancient magic. Bridges of ice connected spires that defied gravity, suspended in silence, untouched by time. It was beautiful and terrible all at once, a palace built not by mortals, but by odds. Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. It's real. Kale stood beside her, his golden eyes reflecting the icy light. It was the heart of your mother's kingdom, he said quietly. The last place the moon shone before the curse. They descended slowly, through paths carved into the mountainside, until the great gates stood before them, enormous doors of black ice, covered in runes that glowed faintly beneath Lyra's touch. As her hand brushed the surface, the ice trembled, and the gates opened without a sound. Inside, time had frozen mid-breath. Thrones stood untouched. Tapestries hung like ghosts. Chandeliers of frost glittered above halls that once echoed with song. The air itself seemed to hold memory, the laughter of courtiers, the howl of royal wolves, the heartbeat of a kingdom that had forgotten how to live. Lyra walked slowly through it all, her footsteps soft against the crystal floor. She felt a strange ache in her chest, a pull that drew her deeper, toward the grand hall at the center of the citadel. When she reached it, her breath caught. At the far end of the hall stood a mirror, not of glass, but of ice so pure it shimmered with light from within. Beneath it, sealed beneath layers of frozen magic, lay a crystal heart, faintly pulsing with blue light. Lyra's hands shook. The heart? Kale stepped beside her. Your mother hid it here, he said, his voice low with reverence. Only her blood can wake it. Lyra reached out, her reflection meeting her gaze in the ice. She looked older, different, no longer the frightened girl from the cottage, but someone reborn through fire and frost. When her fingers touched the heart, warmth surged through the air. The ice cracked, not harshly, but like glass sighing after centuries of silence. Light bloomed outward, spiraling around her, lifting her hair, her cloak, her very soul. The wolves began to howl, faintly at first, then louder, echoing across the mountains. Kale shielded his eyes, his chest tightening as power filled the room, ancient, pure, unstoppable. When the light faded, Lyra stood with the heart glowing softly in her palms, her silver eyes bright as moons. Lyra, Kale whispered, unable to mask the awe in his voice. Do you know what you've done? She looked at him, her lips parting in wonder. I think I woke the moon. But before he could answer, the earth shook. The light dimmed, and a rumble rose from the depths beneath the citadel, deep, heavy, alive. The frost on the walls cracked, spreading like veins of lightning. Kale's hand went to his sword. We're not alone. The floor split open, and from it, darkness poured like smoke. It gathered, coiling upward, forming shape, wings, claws, eyes burning red. A voice followed, low and venomous, echoing through every hall. So, the lost princess finally awakens. Lyra froze. That voice, she had heard it in her nightmares. From the shadows stepped a man draped in black armor, his face half hidden by a wolf mask carved of obsidian. His presence filled the hall with cold fire, power so dense it felt like gravity itself bowed before him. Kale's jaw clenched. The Dark Alpha. The stranger smiled beneath his mask. You kept her well, Kale. Just as the prophecy demanded. Kale's hand tightened on his sword. You'll not touch her. Oh, but I already have, the Dark Alpha whispered, his eyes glinting like burning coal. Her blood carries mine. You didn't tell her that, did you? Lyra staggered back, the heart clutched against her chest. That's not true. It is, the Dark Alpha hissed. Your mother was my sister. You are my blood, my heir, and that heart belongs to us. The ground shook again. Shadows spread across the floor like ink, reaching for Lyra's feet. Kale stepped in front of her, his wolf eyes blazing gold. Over my dead body, he growled. The Dark Alpha laughed. That can be arranged. The clash that followed shattered the silence of the world. Steel met darkness. Light collided with shadow. Kale's blade blazed with runes as he fought, every strike ringing with centuries of rage and love and oath. The Dark Alpha moved like smoke, fast, merciless, his power bending the air itself. Lyra could only watch, her heart pounding, the crystal glowing brighter with every pulse. She could feel its power singing to her, calling her to act. Then Kale fell to one knee, blood marking the ice. Lyra screamed his name. The Dark Alpha raised his hand, gathering a sphere of black fire, the kind that devours souls. Goodbye, brother of wolves, he sneered. But before he could strike, Lyra stepped between them. The heart in her hands blazed, blinding, infinite, alive. The light struck the shadows, splitting them apart. The Dark Alpha roared, stumbling backward as the power tore through him, shredding the curse that bound his form. Lyra's voice echoed through the hall, strong and clear. I am Lyra of Moonvale, daughter of the moon, heir of light, and I will not let the darkness win again. The heart exploded in radiance. The citadel trembled as centuries of ice melted, revealing gold beneath frost, sky above cloud. The curse that had slept over Moonvale broke, shattered like glass. When the light finally faded, silence fell. The Dark Alpha was gone, dissolved into shadow. The citadel stood renewed, walls gleaming, torches alive, banners of silver fluttering once more. Kale knelt beside her, his breath ragged. Lyra? She turned to him, tears of light glimmering in her eyes. It's over. He reached out, his gloved hand trembling as he brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. You've done what no one else could. You restored the moon. But Lyra shook her head softly. No, we did. For a long moment, the two simply stared at one another, no longer a king and his charge, but two souls bound by fate, battle, and love. Outside, the wolves began to sing, a song the world hadn't heard in centuries. And for the first time since Moonvale's fall, the moon rose full and whole, its light spilling across the land like a benediction. The curse was broken, the Alpha's vow fulfilled, but destiny was not done with them yet. The storm had ended. For the first time in centuries, Moonvale's sky shone clear, vast and endless, bathed in moonlight so soft it felt like memory reborn. The citadel no longer lay in ruins. Its walls shimmered with faint light, its towers glowed with ancient warmth. The curse that had gripped it for generations had lifted, but peace did not come easily. Silence filled the grand hall, heavy and sacred. The battle was over, but its echo lived on, in the cracks along the marble, in the blood that streaked Kale's sword, in the faint tremor of Lyra's hands as she stood among the remnants of what had been. The heart's light still pulsed faintly in her chest. She could feel it there now, not as an object she held, but as something that had become part of her, its rhythm merging with her own heartbeat. The moon's blessing had chosen its vessel. And she was that vessel. Kale stood near the shattered throne, his figure framed by moonlight streaming through broken windows. His armor was torn, his skin marked by the dark fire's touch, but his eyes, those golden, wolf-bright eyes, were still steady. Watching her, always watching her. The silence between them was almost unbearable. Lyra's voice broke at first, soft, uncertain. He's gone, isn't he? Kale didn't answer at once. He looked out over the frozen courtyard beyond the doors, where the wind moved through the remnants of battle. The Dark Alpha's body is gone, he said finally. But darkness doesn't die so easily. It waits, hidden, patient. Like hunger. She turned toward him, her cloak brushing the floor. Then we'll find a way to destroy it completely. His gaze flicked to her, not cold, not distant, but filled with something that almost looked like pain. You speak as though there's a we in this, Lyra. There is, she said softly. You swore an oath to protect me, Kale. But I never asked you to fight alone. He looked away, jaw tightening. My oath is what binds me. It's all I am. Lyra stepped closer. No, she whispered. You're more than that. I've seen it, the man behind the title. The one who carries the weight of centuries and still stands for what's right. The words struck something deep within him. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice rough as gravel, he murmured, You shouldn't look at me that way, Lyra. Her breath caught. Why not? Because I'm not what you think I am. He turned then, slowly, his eyes burning brighter in the pale light. When the moon blessed the first alpha, she gave him power, but she also cursed him. Every oath he made bound his soul tighter to the promise, until there was nothing left of the man beneath. I was her chosen king, yes, but I was also her weapon. My life is tied to the bloodline I protect. To you. Lyra frowned slightly. What do you mean? He took a step closer, his voice a whisper that filled the space between them like smoke. It means that as long as you live, I live. If you die, so do I. My soul, my heart, all of it is bound to yours. That is the Alpha's curse. That is my truth. The air seemed to still around them. The faint glow of the moon caught the sharp lines of his face, strength carved from sorrow, beauty bound in restraint. Lyra's voice trembled. Then why didn't you tell me before? Because you didn't need another chain, he said. You already carry enough. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Her hand brushed against his armor, a tentative touch, warm against cold steel. You say it like it's a curse, she whispered. But maybe it's a bond. Kale's breath hitched. His eyes, those ancient, haunted eyes, softened for the first time. You don't understand, he said. If I ever cross the line of what's allowed, if I ever claim you in the way my soul already has, the bond will consume us both. It will merge our hearts, our power, our fates, until neither of us remains human. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. And if that's what destiny wants? He closed his eyes, as if the question itself pained him. Then destiny is cruel. Silence again. Long, heavy, beautiful. Outside, the wolves began to howl, not in mourning, but in reverence. The kingdom was awakening, its spirits stirring, its people beginning to remember. Lyra moved past him, her fingers trailing lightly along the edge of the broken throne. You think love is weakness, she said softly, but love is what restored this kingdom. It's what brought me back. Kale turned toward her, his expression torn between reverence and fear. You don't know what you're saying. I do, she said, lifting her gaze to meet his. I've felt it since the day you found me, that pull between us. The moonlight, the bond, whatever you want to call it, it isn't wrong. It's real, and you're not the only one bound by fate. Her words hung in the air like a confession carved from truth itself. Kale took a slow breath, every movement measured, the controlled calm of a man standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. He reached out, his hand trembling as he cupped her face. His fingers were rough, scarred, cold, but his touch was gentle, almost reverent. Lyra, he murmured, her name a prayer and a warning. If I give in, if I let this bond take hold, you'll never be free. Not of me, not of what I am. She didn't pull away. Her eyes, luminous with silver light, met his without fear. Then let it take us both. For a heartbeat, everything stilled, the air, the world, even time itself. The moon hung high above the citadel, its light pouring through the shattered ceiling, painting them both in its glow. And then, slowly, Kale bent his forehead to hers. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. It was something older, deeper, a meeting of souls long divided. The air shimmered, and Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest, through her veins, through the mark that now pulsed faintly at her collarbone, the symbol of the Alpha's vow. A whisper moved through the air, the voice of the moon itself. Two hearts, one fate. The glow surrounded them both. Kale's breath trembled against her skin. It's begun, he whispered. Lyra looked up at him, her voice steady despite the fear. Then we face it together. And for the first time since the fall of Moonvale, Kale allowed himself to smile, faint, broken, beautiful. He drew her into his arms, holding her as if the world could vanish at any moment, as if she were both salvation and sin. Outside, the wolves howled again, the sound rising to the heavens, a song of bond and blood and rebirth. And deep beneath the citadel, the faint hum of power answered, the remnants of the crystal heart now alive within Lyra's chest, and the old magic of the Alpha awakening once more in Kale's veins. The prophecy had turned its page. The light had returned. But every light casts a shadow, and far beyond the mountains, in the lands where no moon ever rises, something dark began to stir. The bond between Alpha and Air had been sealed. And destiny, as it always did, had only just begun to take shape. The dawn came slow that day. It was not the gentle dawn of peace, nor the fiery dawn of war, but something between, something fragile, as though the very world held its breath before deciding what it wished to become. Over the towers of Moonvale, pale sunlight spilled through the mist, painting the broken stones in gold. The scent of rain clung to the air, mixed with the faint metallic tang of old blood and the cold sweetness of the snow that had yet to melt. For the first time in decades, the kingdom stood in stillness. No battle cries, no echoing commands, no weeping. Only the quiet murmur of life returning. Lyra stood upon the highest balcony of the citadel, her cloak trailing behind her like a dark wing. The wind tangled through her hair, lifting strands of silver and shadow. Beneath her, the valley stretched endlessly, forests reborn, rivers thawing, villages slowly stirring from their slumber. She had seen this view once before, when she was still a child, before the fire, before the curse, before her name had been erased from every record in the kingdom. Now, standing as the living vessel of the moon's blessing, she felt both smaller and greater than she had ever been. Kale watched her from the archway. He didn't speak, he rarely did anymore. But there was something in the way he stood, that still, commanding presence, that filled the silence between them with unspoken meaning. He was the Alpha King now, no longer only the guardian or the weapon. The bond had changed him. His aura had deepened, thickened, carrying the weight of power that could shake mountains. Yet within that power, there was quiet, a dangerous kind of calm, the calm of a man who had finally accepted his fate. Lyra turned to him slowly. "They'll come, won't they?" she asked softly. Kale's gaze swept toward the horizon, where shadows moved faintly between the ridges. "Yes," he said, "the other packs will come. Some to kneel, others to test the strength of their new king." "And the darkness?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It hasn't vanished. It only hides, waiting for what we've awakened." Lyra looked down, fingers brushing the rail. "Then we must find it before it finds us." Kale's eyes softened, a glimmer of pride, of sorrow, of something far older than either emotion. "You speak like a queen already." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I learned from the most stubborn king in history." A shadow of amusement crossed his face, but it faded quickly. "You don't understand, Lyra. The packs, they're fractured. Each one has lived by its own law since the fall of the old kingdom. Many don't believe the moon's heir still lives. And those who do, might not want her back. Then we'll make them see," she said, turning fully toward him. "Not with power, with purpose." Her words settled between them like a promise. Kale didn't argue. He only stepped closer, the distance between them closing like the drawing of a blade from its sheath. The bond that tied them pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of silver light beneath her skin, mirrored in his. They would stand together, king and heir, alpha and vessel. But destiny, ever cruel and ever kind, had other plans waiting. That evening, the court gathered in the great hall for the first time in generations. The chandeliers hung half-broken but still glimmering, and the banners of old, torn yet proud, were raised once again along the marble columns. Wolves from distant lands had arrived, cloaked emissaries, scarred warriors, curious seers with eyes like smoke. Each one brought word from a pack that had survived the age of silence. Some bowed deeply before the throne, others did not. Kale stood at the head of the hall, tall and still as a monument, his voice carrying the calm of thunder. "Moonvale rises again," he said. "And with it, the unity our ancestors bled for. The curse is broken. The bloodline restored. The heir lives." A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd, disbelief, awe, jealousy. Lyra stepped forward then, the soft light of the moonstone crest gleaming faintly at her throat. Her voice, though quiet, carried clear through the hall. You all remember the tales, she said. The daughter lost to the fire. The alpha who vanished into shadow. The kingdom that fell. Those were not myths, they were warnings. And now, we are the answer to them. A scarred elder from the Shadow Fang pack rose to speak. And what would you have of us, child of Moonvale? To kneel? To forget the blood that was spilled? Lyra met his gaze without flinching. Not to forget, she said. To forgive. To rebuild. The moon didn't choose one alpha or one pack, she chose all of us. There was silence. Then, slowly, one by one, heads began to bow. Not all, but enough. Kale watched her, something fierce and proud flickering in his golden eyes. That night, the moon shone brighter than it had in years. But even as the kingdom celebrated, something stirred in the deep forests beyond the northern ridge, where the moonlight never reached. There, in the ruins of an old temple, a faint red glow pulsed from beneath the earth. A whisper echoed in the dark, ancient, broken, angry. The bond has awakened, then so shall I. The ground trembled. The shadows coiled like serpents. A pair of eyes, blacker than night, rimmed in crimson, opened within the void. The dark alpha lived, not as he once was, but as something worse, a spirit unbound by body, feeding on the fear and ambition of those who still doubted the new reign. He would not strike yet. No, he would wait. He would let the new Alpha King and his heir rebuild what he could later break. For darkness was patient, and the shadow of the moon always followed its light. Days turned to weeks. Moonvale began to breathe again. Villages were restored. Wolves who had once been enemies began to trade and speak across the old borders. The mountain paths opened, and the howl of the king carried once again through the valley, a sound both fierce and noble, declaring the unity of the packs. But within the castle, both Lyra and Kale knew peace was only temporary. Each night, as the moon rose, they trained, not in swordplay or strategy, but in control. The bond between them grew stronger, unpredictable. Sometimes it burned like fire, sometimes it felt like the touch of a memory that wasn't their own. When Lyra's emotions surged, the moon's power flared through her veins, lighting the room in silver. When Kale's temper rose, the ground itself trembled, answering his alpha call. Together, they became something more than legend, they became balance. Yet balance is fragile. And when one heart begins to lean too far into feeling, the other must hold fast, or both shall fall. Kale knew it. Lyra knew it. And so, though they stood side by side, their hands brushing, their eyes finding each other in the quiet moments between war and peace, neither spoke of what burned between them. Not yet. One night, as the sky bled gold and violet over the peaks, Lyra walked alone to the ancient garden of the moon's shrine, the same place she had once seen her mother's spirit. The flowers there glowed faintly under the moonlight, petals humming softly with old magic. She knelt before the fountain, whispering to the reflection that stared back, a girl who had lost everything and gained a destiny too heavy for her hands. I don't know if I'm ready, she murmured. I don't know if I ever will be. Behind her, a quiet voice answered, low and familiar. No one ever is. Kale stepped from the shadows, the moonlight painting his hair silver, his eyes molten gold. I thought I was alone, she said softly. You were, he replied. Until I found you. He came to stand beside her, silent for a long moment. The air between them felt charged again, not dangerous, but alive. You've done what no alpha before you has done, Kale said finally. You've united them. You've given them hope. Lyra looked at him, her eyes bright. And yet you still look like a man waiting for war. Because I am, he said simply. Peace never lasts long where power is reborn. Her gaze softened. Then I suppose it's good I have a king who doesn't run from storms. He smiled faintly, a rare, quiet smile. And a queen who walks into them. The fountain's reflection shimmered. For a heartbeat, they stood there, two souls bound by duty, desire, and something neither of them could name without breaking the fragile peace they had fought for. And above them, the moon watched, serene, eternal, knowing that the path ahead was only growing darker. For in the light's rebirth, the shadow had awakened too. And soon, it would come for them both. The night came too soon. It descended upon Moonvale like a curtain of ink poured across the stars, and the air itself seemed to tremble with the weight of something vast and unseen. For weeks, the kingdom had known uneasy peace, a peace that hummed like a string pulled too tight. The packs had begun to trust again, to rebuild the bridges burned by fear and generations of silence. Yet beneath the surface, something darker moved. The wolves of the northern ridges began vanishing without trace. The rivers grew colder, their surfaces whispery, faint echoes of names long forgotten. The moon itself began to pale, its silver glow thinning into a bruised crimson at its edges. Lyra felt it first, the pull of the change. It started as a restlessness in her chest, a dull ache beneath her ribs that throbbed with each rising moon. At first, she thought it grief, the echo of everything she had lost. But soon she realized it was something else. Something waking. When she stood in the great hall one evening, the chandeliers flickering with low flame, she could feel the pulse of the moon through the very stones, slow, heavy, mourning. It whispered of imbalance. It whispered of a promise broken long ago. And it whispered his name. Kale found her standing there, one hand pressed to the marble column as though holding the castle itself together. His eyes caught hers, molten gold meeting silver stormlight. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Kale said softly, "You feel it too." She nodded. "The moon is bleeding." He walked closer, his boots echoing through the hollow hall. "The seers say the veil between realms is thinning. That something is clawing its way back from the dark." Her voice was barely a whisper. The Dark Alpha. Kale's jaw tightened. Yes, the memory of that name was poison in his mind. The ancient wolf who had defied the moon's order, who had turned his pack against the light, who had sought to make the bond between Alpha and Air his own. He had been destroyed, or so the legends said, by the first Alpha King, Lyra's ancestor. But legends were never the whole truth. Some darkness does not die. It waits. Kale reached for her hand, his grip steady, grounding. "We'll stop him." Lyra's gaze lifted to his. "You don't know what he is. He isn't flesh anymore, he's shadow. He's everything that feeds on fear and doubt. If he rises." Kale's expression darkened. "Then I'll meet him there, in the dark." He turned toward the great doors. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, a cry that carried both warning and invitation. The war had begun again, not of blood this time, but of spirits. The first sign came with the reddening of the moon. It happened on the 13th night of the frost moon, a night the seers had begged the court to avoid travel, to remain in prayer. The sky had been clear at sunset, calm and quiet. But by midnight, the heavens split open with a sound like cracking stone. Every wolf in Moonvale lifted its head and howled. The moon bled, not in a trickle, but in a great, slow tide of crimson light that poured across the land. The rivers reflected it, the trees bent beneath it, and the very air trembled. Lyra stumbled from her chamber to the balcony, her hands clutching the railing as the glow drenched her skin. It burned, not painfully, but with an ancient heat. Like fire made of memory. The moon's voice filled her mind again. "Child of silver, keeper of balance, the shadow you cast has come to claim its name." She gasped, her heart hammering. Visions flooded her, the old temple cracking open, wolves turning feral under crimson light, the spirit of the Dark Alpha rising like smoke from the earth, his voice a growl that echoed through the marrow of her bones. "You took what was mine." She screamed. The balcony trembled, and in the throne hall below, Kale felt it. The bond between them flared, a line of fire connecting his heart to hers. Without thought, he ran. The palace guards bowed aside as he passed, the doors shattering open with a pulse of his aura. His wolf was near the surface now, eyes glowing, claws itching beneath his skin. He found her on the balcony, light swirling around her like a storm. Her hair lifted in the wind, silver burning into white, and for a moment he saw the truth of her, not the lost heir, not the fragile girl, but the moon's vessel incarnate. The sight both awed and terrified him. He called her name once, twice, before his voice finally cut through the power. "Lyra." Her head turned. For a heartbeat, he saw recognition, then the light broke. She collapsed into his arms. Kale held her tightly, his pulse roaring in his ears. "I've got you," he whispered, though his own voice trembled. "I've got you." She opened her eyes, dazed. "He's awake, Kale. He's coming for you." "For me?" he asked. Her voice cracked. "Because you're the last Alpha born under her blessing. The only one who can bind him again. But if you fail..." Her words trailed off. She didn't need to finish. If he failed, he would become what the Dark Alpha once was. The prophecy was not only about her rebirth, it was about his test. For days after, the kingdom spiraled into preparation. Messengers rode across snow and river, calling every allied pack to Moonvale's banner. The forges blazed through the nights, reforging old silver weapons long locked in vaults. The healers mixed herbs of light and iron, the seers wove charms of moonstone and salt toward the halls. Lyra recovered slowly, her body weak from the moon's surge. Yet her spirit burned brighter than ever. She spent her nights in the sacred library, poring over the scrolls of the first Alpha's reign, searching for the ritual that had sealed the darkness before. Kale joined her often, though his presence was quieter now, more watchful, as though part of him was already fighting the thing waiting beyond the veil. One evening, as they stood together before an ancient mural, Lyra found her voice again. "Kale," she said quietly, "do you ever wonder why the moon chose you?" He didn't look at her at first. "Because I was strong enough to carry her burden." "No," she said softly, "because you were kind enough not to let it consume you." The words struck him deeper than any blade. He turned then, eyes shadowed but warm. "And you, Lyra, do you know why she brought you back?" She hesitated. "To restore balance?" Kale shook his head slowly. "No. To teach us what it means to deserve peace." For a long while, they stood in silence. The mural before them, a depiction of the first Alpha and his mate standing beneath a silver moon, shimmered faintly, as if remembering. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, Kale reached out and took her hand. No power, no magic, just touch. It was enough. For that heartbeat, the moon's bleeding slowed. The air stilled. The bond between them pulsed once, steady, sure. Perhaps love was not the enemy of power after all. The battlefield was silent, not with peace, but with that fragile, impossible stillness that comes after something sacred has broken. All around the valley, the ruins of the war shimmered faintly beneath the pale light of the fading blood moon. The rivers ran silver again, though streaks of red still drifted across their surface like bruises not yet healed. The air smelled of ash, iron, and rain. The packs stood scattered, Alpha warriors with torn armor, healers tending to the wounded, elders kneeling among the dead. And at the center of it all, at the heart of the still smoking ruins, stood two figures, one cloaked in shadow, the other in light. The dark Alpha towered like a storm made flesh, his form shifting between beast and mist, eyes burning with ancient fury. His voice, when it came, was not sound but thunder made word. "You cannot stop me, boy. I am everything the moon cast away. I am her forgotten truth." And before him, bloodied but unbroken, stood Kale, the Alpha King, his chest rising with slow, steady breaths. His sword, forged from moonstone and silver, dripped light instead of blood. His golden eyes blazed like a dying sun refusing to dim. Behind him, barely conscious but alive, Lyra knelt amid the broken altar stones, her hands pressed to her heart as if holding it together. Her once silver hair now gleamed with streaks of white fire, a sign that the moon's power still lived within her. When she looked up and saw Kale standing alone before the darkness, her heart shattered with both pride and terror. He looked back once, just once, and in that glance, everything they had ever been to each other passed between them. The girl who spoke to wolves. The Alpha who guarded her even when the world forgot her name. The prophecy that bound them. And the love neither of them had dared to confess until there was no time left to hide it. The sky cracked open as the dark Alpha roared. Shadows poured from his form, writhing across the earth like serpent. Ts of smoke. The very stars seemed to recoil. Kale raised his sword, his aura igniting in a blaze of gold and silver. The ground trembled beneath his feet, splitting with light. "You speak of truth," he said quietly, his voice carrying like thunder across the valley. But the moon's truth was never fear. It was choice. It was love. The dark Alpha's laugh was a sound of shattered worlds. "Love is weakness. It is what destroyed me." Kale stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Then let it destroy me too." He struck. The two forces collided, shadow and light, past and present, curse and redemption. The explosion that followed tore through the valley, shaking mountains, shattering stone, splitting the very sky in half. Wolves fell to their knees. The packs shielded their eyes. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, light. Blinding, endless, pure. Lyra felt the force hit her chest like a tidal wave. The moon's bond between her and Kale ignited, a tether of silver flame connecting their souls. She gasped, her body lifting from the ground as the moon's voice whispered through her mind. You have seen what power becomes without love. Now show the world what love becomes with power. The tears burned her cheeks as she raised her trembling hands. All around her, the fragments of the fallen altar began to glow. The stones lifted into the air, spinning slowly in a circle around her body. Her heartbeat matched Kale's, her breath echoed his. Through the light, she could see him, standing in the midst of the storm, his sword buried in the chest of the Dark Alpha, his body torn, his aura flickering. He looked at her through the chaos. And smiled. Lyra screamed his name, not in fear, but in fury, in love, in a sound that tore through worlds. Her voice became power. Her tears became magic. Her love became salvation. The bond erupted into a surge of lunar fire that swept across the battlefield, engulfing both Kale and the Dark Alpha in its brilliance. For one heartbeat, everything went white. And then, silence. When Lyra opened her eyes again, the storm was gone. The sky was clear. The moon, full and silver, shone brighter than it ever had before. The Dark Alpha was no more. Only ashes remained, scattered like dust across the earth. The wolves lifted their heads one by one, their howls rising not in grief, but in awe. The curse had broken. The packs were free. But Lyra's eyes searched the battlefield desperately. Through the smoke, through the fading magic, she saw him, Kale, lying still at the center of the ruin. Her heart stopped. She stumbled to him, her knees hitting the ground beside his body. His skin was cold, his breath faint. The sword lay beside him, its light dimming. No, she whispered, her voice shaking. You promised. She pressed her hand to his chest, searching for a heartbeat that refused to come. The moon's power flickered through her veins, weak but still alive. She could feel it trying to hold him, to keep him tethered. Please, she begged the heavens. Take me instead. The wind stirred. The moon's voice, soft, ancient, sorrowful, filled the air once more. He gave his heart to save your world. But the heart given in love does not fade, it waits. Lyra bent over him, tears falling onto his skin. And as they touched him, as her tears met his heart, a pulse of light spread through his chest. Once, twice, a breath. Kale's eyes opened. He looked at her for a long moment, disoriented, then smiled faintly, tired, but alive. You never listen when I tell you to stay behind. Lyra laughed through her tears, pressing her forehead to his. And you never stop trying to save me. His hand lifted weakly, fingers brushing her cheek. Then maybe we deserve each other. The words were soft, but they carried farther than any roar, farther than any crown. The packs bowed. The moon shone brighter. And for the first time in centuries, Moonvale was at peace. Weeks passed. The castle was rebuilt, not of gold or marble, but of stone and starlight, humble yet strong. The banners of the packs hung side by side in the great hall. At the highest tower, beneath the moon's glow, Kale and Lyra stood side by side, no longer just king and heir, alpha and vessel, but partners bound by something greater than prophecy. The air was cool, the night alive with the sound of distant howls. Kale turned to her, his eyes warm and human again. So, he said softly, how does it feel to be the daughter the moon remembered? Lyra smiled, the kind of smile that could light a century. It feels like I finally came home. He took her hand. You were always home. Above them, the moon burned silver and calm, no longer bleeding, no longer broken. And as the wind swept through the mountains, carrying the harmony of 1,000 wolves, the kingdom of Moonvale, the forgotten, the cursed, the lost, rose again. Not through conquest, not through power, but through love. The moon chose them both. And this time, it chose right.